Hey guys, it's Charlene. I have a super fun video for you today showing you how to get more out of your products. This is the new Easter egg swag die from Picket Studios, and we are going to be playing with some paper glaze. We've got Lavender, Daze, Robin Egg Blue, and Peach Cobbler, and this is a great way to add some needed shine to your cards. So we'll start with the purple. I'm working here on a piece of 80-pound Nina white cover stock, nothing super fancy, and I'm just putting a thin layer. I first started with the lavender, now I'm moving on to the Robin Egg Blue. Again, a thin layer, don't need very much on there. The goal is to get this to dry pretty quickly. Lastly, adding some peach cobbler on there. I'll set that aside to dry, and now I'm going to die cut the Easter egg swag die from another piece of white cardstock. This is a really pretty die. It has these 3 eggs with bows at the top, and they are hanging from a tree branch. It does take a little while to pop out all of these little pieces, but when you're done, it's totally worth it. Now, I'm putting this down on my paper inking palette. Why? Because this is going to make it so that I can ink blend on here without bending any of those little pieces. I've got some distress oxide. I'm working with broken china, shaded lilac, and spiced marmalade. These 3 colors are going to coordinate really well with our paper glaze Luxe that we're using. So I'm grabbing some masking tape here, just masking off the egg next to the first one, as well as the bow, because I'm going to do some ink blending directly onto these die cuts. See now what I was saying about the paper inking palette helping, because it holds down the die cut in place so it doesn't move around on me. I'm bringing in the ink just from the edges, kind of going in towards the middle, but I don't want the middle to get super dark. I just want it to have a tiny, tiny bit of color in the middle, so that way we get a 3D look on these Easter eggs. If you darken the edges and the bottom and the top, then it naturally makes it look like your egg is rounded. Once I get that broken china on the first one, I can remove off my masking tape here, reuse the tape. We don't need to waste that, and now work on the middle one. Bringing in the shaded lilac, which is a nice light purple. It's got some blue tones to it, and going just around those edges again. Once I'm done with the purple, I will do the same thing here with the last egg, and I'm using the spiced marmalade on there, just going around those edges. I'm not picking up very much ink on my brush at all, just the tiniest little bit. This also helps so that you don't waste your ink. So now I'll take off the masking tape there, and I want to build up the color around the edges of those eggs even more and make them a little darker. And I'll show you how to do that when I'm done coloring in my branch here at the top. So for the branch, I am going to use gathered twigs, and I will just take my ink and go all the way across the branch. I don't need to do anything fancy with the branch because it's not really going to be the focal point on my card. The eggs really are going to be the focal point. So I'm just picking up the ink and going back and forth. Now I can gently lift my piece up. I'm using tweezers so I can avoid getting a lot of fingerprints on that distress oxide. Let's build up that color on the edges of our eggs. This is super easy to do. I'm just using what's left on my ink blending brush. I'm holding the die cut in my fingers, and I'm just pulling at an angle. All right, I have here some OR 1.2, some BV 1.2, and B 2.4. I'm going to use this alcohol marker just to run right over the ribbon. Not doing anything fancy. Literally just running my marker right along the ribbon, and I purposely chose colors that were close but not the same. I want there to be some difference between the color there so you can tell that the ribbon is a separate piece from the egg, even though we're not cutting this piece apart at all. So these are fun tricks you can use when you're working with one large die cut and you want to make it look like there are separate pieces. Here is our dried paper glaze piece. You can see how beautiful and shiny it is when you turn it in the light. Love this product. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take our die. I'm not going to die cut this because I want this piece to stay solid, but I do want to use my die to get a sense of how much I need to cut. So I'm just holding the die that I know is going to be the one I'm going to use, which for the purple is in the middle. I cut around it, and now I can add some glue to the back of my egg and glue that solid piece of the paper glaze behind it. I'm not going to try and trim it down perfectly yet. I'm actually going to wait until it is dried onto the egg to do that. I find it easier to work with like that. You're much less likely to overcut and then have to essentially start over again, right? So I cut out the orange in the same exact way as well as the blue. I've glued them on there, and I just put an acrylic block on the back while it's drying. Easy peasy, make sure it stays nice and flat. And then once it's dry, I can come in here with my fine point scissors and just cut right around the edges of those eggs. This ensures that everything is going to align perfectly and that we don't have any mishaps with our cutting. Okay, we finished that, and look at this shine, guys. Look, there it is. It looks so cool. Like you wouldn't know it from looking straight on, but as soon as this card gets turned in the light, all that shimmer and shine from the paper glaze is seen on the eggs. It's like a kind of a fun hidden thing. All right, I'm using the same stencil set, Layers of Adventure. I used this in my last video too. It's such a versatile stencil. It literally can create any kind of background that you need. So I'm going to do a cloudy sky, keep it pretty simple. I have an A2 size piece of cardstock here and bringing in tumbled glass. This is one of my favorite colors of ink to use to create a sky. It's just a really nice light blue. It's not bold, but it's also not pastel-y. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but I think it's a perfect sky blue. So I'm flipping my stencil around. You can do that when you're using your stencils, don't forget. And it's going to help me vary the pattern of the cloud. And I'm creating that cloud pattern just by putting a tiny bit of ink on my brush and running it along the edge of the stencil. And all that does is it creates kind of this nice blue feeling of a cloud. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. If you haven't worked with this kind of stencil before, it makes creating a cloudy sky so simple. So I want to make sure the focus is in towards the center of my card. So I'm building up my own border here with the ink rather than putting a colored piece of cardstock as a border around my card. I'm just using my ink to accomplish the exact same thing. And once I've gone all the way around the edges, I kind of bring my brush in and do a little swoop kind of motion along the corners, and that helps to create a nice sort of halo oval in the center. If it's too white, you can knock back your white a little bit just by rubbing what's left on your brush around on the cardstock. For sentiment, I'm going to do Sending You an Easter Hello, and this is from the Follow That Bunny stamps. And it's a cute little simple sentiment. Because our die cuts are rather large, or I should say that the swag itself is rather large, I want to use a small sentiment, because if you have big die cuts and a small sentiment, that tends to work well. And if you have smaller die cuts, that tends to work well with a larger sentiment. So I'll stamp that sentiment out here with my black hybrid ink, and I'm going to stamp it a couple of times. I almost always do this now with all my stamps. I used to pride myself on, oh, I got it done in one stamping, and then I realized how silly that was because I don't want the lines to get messed up at all. I don't want to push too hard with my stamp, but I want to have that really nice black color. And I find you can accomplish that just by doing multiple stampings, and you end up getting a nicer result. Added some foam tape here to the back of the swag die. I had to cut it down pretty thin for the branch, but by popping this up on our card, it's really going to make a big difference. Now, notice I did not take the release tape off on the eggs. If you're working with a big die, try to figure out how you can just take off some of the release tape on the foam, so that way you can place that part and you then can go back and remove the release tape from the rest of the die cut and lay it down. It just makes it easier to line up. You don't have kind of pieces flopping all over and adhering where you don't want them to be. So taking that release tape off of our center egg, and now I can make sure it's nice and straight and looks really pretty on the center of our card there, because it wouldn't look so great, right, if it was kind of swinging off to the right or the left. I suppose it could be a windy day, but that's not what we're going for. We want those eggs to be hanging straight up and down on this card. All right, I've done the purple. Moving on to the other two eggs, finished them off. Love how cards look with stuff popped up, just so good. I'm going to have the sentiment coming off to the right here, but because it's going to be going over the top of that egg, I need to add a little bit of bolstering, I guess you could say, in order for it to be level. So I've cut down two tiny little scraps of white cardstock here, and I'm putting them over on the back right hand side, and then my foam tape on top of them. So now there's a foam tape and two pieces of scrap cardstock. Because our egg is made up of two pieces of cardstock, this is going to make it so that everything sits nice and level on the front of our card, and it's going to be supported easily through the mail. I've got the Easter Bop sequin mix. There's all kinds of fun stuff in this sequin mix, different colors, little baubles and pearls and all kinds of stuff. I went ahead and just picked out 3 of these iridescent kind of pearls, and I'm going to glue them right on top of the egg, right below where the bow begins. This extra little bit here is going to, again, help break apart the die cut. So it looks like there are multiple different pieces, even though we didn't have to deal with trying to put together multiple different pieces. Hopefully that makes sense. So I added some glue to the back net there. Last step here, gluing it onto an A2 sized card base, and we are done. Look at all of that fun surprise kind of shimmer and shine from the paper glaze backed behind our Easter eggs there. All right, guys, I hope you picked up some tips and tricks today. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that you'll know about future videos here on the Picket Studios YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.